Okay. Hi everyone. Good morning from Malaysia. My name is Nur Fazlina Betkam Bahrain. So I would like to share with everyone on the public's finance for the social protection in Malaysia. So as a background, Malaysia is a country in Southeast Asia. Our neighboring countries, Singapore, Indonesia, Thailand, and Brunei. Malaysia is an export-oriented country with total population around 32.4 million, with the children aged 0 to 14 around 7.6 million, and older population above 65 around 2.3 million. So the poverty rate has increased in last year to 8.9% compared to 5.6% in the previous year. As one of the middle upper income country, our GDP per capita is around 10,400, and three main types of our social protection system in Malaysia, which are social assistance, social insurance, and also labor market policy. In terms of the revenue and expenditure side, in the chart, one shows that the government revenue and expenditure level over time. So if we look at in terms of our government revenue and expenditure has been trending upward in terms of the value, but in terms of the percentage of the GDP, the level has been trending downward, especially after the Asian financial crisis in 1998 to 1999. So in 2020, total revenue of GDP recorded around 15.9% of the GDP. Malaysia is one of the upper middle income country. So the level was significantly lower against its peers, around 28% of the GDP. For information, Malaysia revenue can be divided into two main sources: one, petroleum related, and non-petroleum revenue. So Malaysia petroleum or oil revenue accounted around 20% of total revenue, while 70% are coming from the non-petroleum revenue. So the abolishment of the GST in 2018 has resulted to the drop in the revenue in particular, and we expect the higher revenue from the oil prices. Oil revenue will continue to pick up in the coming month. So in terms of the expenditure, the bulk of the income is spent on the operating expenditure, particularly in emolument, including the civil servant retirement, debt charges and utility, while little resources spent on the development program in the specific sector. So if you look at in terms of the tax mix, Malaysia tax mix relies more on the direct tax, with accounted around 52%, particularly coming from the company income tax, petroleum income tax, and also personal income. While our indirect tax counted around 22%, coming from sales and services tax. In terms of the tax to GDP ratio, is considering over time is actually considering a remain flat, suggests further space for the improvement needed given the range of the tax to GDP ratio hovering around 21%, hovering around 12 to 40% of the GDP from 2007 to 2019. So this also significantly lower compared to other Asian and Pacific, which they are accounted around 21% of the GDP. If you look at in terms of the expenditure, Malaysia expenditure as percentage of the GDP was notably lower than the high income and upper middle income countries, with the social expenditures as percentage of the GDP recorded around 6.2% of the GDP compared to the selected expenditure as percentage of the GDP. So this also in line with the little revenue spent in a social sector in development expenditure and subsidy and social assistance in operating expenditure. So if you look at in here, the share of GDP, okay. If you look at here, the share of the, if you look at here, the share of of the social sector to develop expenditure only recorded around 26%, which also higher spent in education, but it's actually lower compared to the economic sector around 57%. Meanwhile, spending on the subsidy and social assistance has peaked in 2008 due to the government global financial crisis, but it's likely driven to the fuel subsidy. But Malaysia just did a rationalization of the fuel subsidy reform in 2013 and rolled out in the 2014. So the share of the subsidy and social assistance has seen moderating until now. As Malaysia towards an aging population, so this will definitely put pressure on the subsidy and social assistance when the retirement saving or pensions are deemed insufficient to attain minimal living of standard. So in terms of the numbers, if you look at here, in terms of the numbers, there are about more than 130 programs available in 2019 compared to 85 program in 2016, which is higher spending goes to the cash transfer. The concerns remain, especially the cash transfer program, with very limited and not universal. So these financial assistance are meant to cover only two major groups, which are productive and unproductive poor. So in addition, gradual increase in government revenue. All right, sorry, there's a problem. Sorry, this is okay. I have to go next. Okay. Okay. Sorry. Okay. If you could look at here, our social assistance is actually quite big in terms of there's around 130 programs compared to 85 programs in the previous year. So the most is actually coming from the cash transfer. So now it's actually with the gradual increase in our government expenditure on the public pension and also gratuity also is expected to increase given the scheme are funded by the government through the tax revenue. So if we add the expenditure on the pension and also gratuities and the emolument for the services for the civil sector service, so the total of both expenditure is about half of the operating expenditure allocation. So the trend reflects a system is which member of the low income group not covered by social security are at a disadvantage, not only being excluded in the coverage or so. So in terms of the key performance, if you look at here, in terms of the key performance of the social protection in Malaysia, similar to other developing countries, the evolution of the social protection in Malaysia began as early as the post-independent period. So social protection was first provided via public programs, which focus on the social assistance through the provisions of the basic needs such as education, healthcare, and sanitation facilities. So the new economic policy, which was introduced in 1971, provided a monumental strike towards the eradication of the poverty. So this effort resulted in the sharp decline in the absolute poverty from the 12% of the total population in early 1980s to around 0.2% populations in 2015, in compared to the global poverty ratio around 26%. So this also highlights the importance of complementing income support with the active labor market policy to sustainably enhance productivity and boost income, particularly for the low-income countries. While these were important progress toward developing a comprehensive social protection system in Malaysia, most of the measures were somewhat episodic, introduced in response to the period of the economic stress only. So a systematic, thorough and holistic review of the social protection system is therefore warranted to ensure social protection policy are more comprehensive, inclusive, sustainable, and also equipped to meet its objective. So in terms of the gap, we see the gap is actually in response to the economic impact of the both COVID-19 pandemic and the subsequent movement restriction. The social protection system has proved vital. So there are four main gaps of the social protection system that need to be addressed in Malaysia. One is in terms of the social assistance, as particularly on the over-reliant on the safety net social assistance net programs, which are weak targeting and verifications, capacity risk, undermining the policy effectiveness. Like currently, most of the fiscal spend for the social protection program in Malaysia goes toward the social assistance and non-contributory scheme. So this is a predominantly the result of the fragmented policy managed by multiple agencies at the both federal and also state government. So we also see that most of the social assistance in Malaysia are in the form of the short-term buffer, lacking legal and sustainable financial commitment. So this has resulted in an unsustainable program, of which many are small and fragmented, often with the inadequate of the benefit. Second one, in terms of the social insurance, especially in terms of the lack of coverage for the worker in the informal sector and the self-employed. If you look at here, social security in Malaysia, they have a tool, the main is which cover the formal sector, SOCSO and also APF, which also see the demonstrate a very great agility and speed in providing relief during the current crisis. However, the coverage of this scheme, which are contributory in nature, are limited to only for the employees in formal sector. So, and third one is in terms of the social assistance also, really see inadequate pension coverage and increasing fiscal burden of the public pension. Social insurance in Malaysia face several challenges, particularly in terms of sufficiency and sustainability. So this is a further compounded by the Malaysia aging population. Sufficiently on the retirement income is a critical issue for the private sector employees as Malaysia actually towards an age nation status, with the old age dependency ratio expected to increase to 16% in 2040 compared to 8.5% in 2025. On the third one is in terms of accessibility and the training not meeting the industry need, particularly in the active labor market policy, because it's also fragmented policy resulted in the low accessibility and also training not meeting the industry demand due to the duplication, also fragmentation, which also seems like the issue in the social assistance. Okay. In terms of how to propose in terms of the value for the money, there are three main things to propose for the social protection reform. One is in terms of the social protection reform, from the charity model of poverty targeting to the more inclusive life cycle approach that is a forward-looking in preventing poverty and also addressing the vulnerability. Because the universal life cycle scheme are good channel to reach the missing middle, while also generating the spillover and the multiplier effect for the household and economy. If you look at the chart also, Malaysia have a limited provision benefit to the maternity, sickness and unemployment and employment, and we also we don't have any universal benefit for the children and also family. So the second one is to establish a unified society registry, which a unified society registry aim to collect, record and restore updated the historical informations and also characteristics to determine the eligibility for the system program, which currently many social assistance program fragmented and redundant. The third one is an integrated management information system. So broader system that enable flows and management information within and between the social programs, as also sometimes beyond to the other sector. Okay, in terms of how to propose on the cost option for the social protection reform, I would like to propose two. One, which is both covered under the universal scheme, which are universal child benefit and also universal social pension. The suggestion of both scheme because of their comparatively higher coverage rate and lower exclusion error. In addition, this scheme administrative simplicity, so whereby beneficiary do not need to prove their eligibility. It's also an advantage as it eliminates multiple barriers to assistance, including reducing the potential for bribery and also abuse of the power by authorities. In the UCB or Universal Child's Benefit aim to ensure that children basic needs are taken care throughout the childhood and adolescence. So the allowance benefit proposed under these schemes around 100 per month for the children age 0 to 17 years old. So for instance, if they have 2 kids, so they will get 200. So they will receive annual around 2,400 annually. So in terms of the eligibility, the total number of the children will benefit is approximately around 9.2 million or 27.7 out of total populations. In terms of the cost, a benefit is actually will require additional.
No, firstly now.
Yep.
Sorry to interrupt. But
yes,
I think you're almost done, right?
Oh, yes. Okay, I almost done. So just give me a couple minutes. Okay. So
okay, just go ahead.
Right. So because there is some breaking issues earlier. Okay. So I would like to propose the universal child benefits and also old age universal old age pensions, which also will only accounted expenditure around for the child benefit around 2.8 plus a government expenditure for the old age benefit around 2.2%, 2.3%. So in terms of the GP, it's actually is less than the global average for the universal child benefit around 1%, and also 0.5% only for the old age benefit, which also slightly lower compared to the current cash transfer that we targeted to our old age around 27. So there are 4 things to propose for our potential fiscal space for the social protection reform. One is increasing the tax base, particularly to go for the one-off tax to the corporate super profit, which definitely will increase the tax revenue, also strengthen the implementation of the strategy to improve the government tax collection effectiveness. Second is actually prioritizing our global government spending from the low impact of the investment to more on the social protections, and also more and also the third one is eliminating illicit financial flow, because Malaysia is actually ranked around top 30 country with the highest illicit outflow. And the last one is expand our social security coverage, broadening to the this contributory scheme to more informal sector. Give me just a couple of minutes. So for the medium term, same goes. We also propose for the universal pensions as universal social pension, as well as given with the Malaysia is actually going to the aging populations. Now we already touched the 7% of the benchmark of the aging population of up to 65 years old. So with the first attack is actually just go for the middle old age, 70 years and above, which only accounted around 2.25% of the total government revenue, and this is actually based on the indexation average income. So moving forward, there's 3 things for the way forward for the social protection. First is actually promote equity through the protection against poverty. Second is promoting resilience for the vulnerable through the insurance against the impact of the drop in the well-being from the shock. And the third one is promote opportunity for all through the promotion of the human capital and the connection of the workers to the productive employment. So the last one, how to leverage support for the reform within the public finance management cycle, is one, to improve the budget system to enhance fiscal planning and enable public access to the informations. And second one is high quality information is needed for the effective policy making and also financial planning. And the last one is actually in terms of the oversight body to make sure that it's accountable, especially to make sure that they fulfill the needs and expectation of the stakeholder and auditors. That's all. Thank you.
Clap, 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 clap. We can all clap for that.
Well done.
Thank you.
Well
Sorry, this is an issue of my network. They stuck a bit. Okay, so next, any question or we want to go next?
Okay, any question?
No, lots of information. I think it was.
Yeah.
Okay.
The
Lots of
presentation
information
was
process.
kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
So can we go to Verena?
So
Yeah. Yeah.
Excuse me,
I think
Nurfazina, just one question.
Yes.
I know, and you said also that Malaysia, it's very rich country in terms of oil, and revenues from the oil production is takes significant share in the national budget. But also we know that the revenues from the oil very volatile.
Yes.
So volatile, yes. And how? What do you think? How it could be? This risk could be addressed?
Yes, it's actually even before Malaysia has have our contribution to the oil revenue is quite extensive. Particularly after we abolish the GST or goods services tax or value added tax in 2018 May. Before the we started establish our GST was on April 2015 and ended in May 2018. Since that, before the 2015, the revenue collection is actually coming from the dividend one of our Petronas atau petroleum company. So they have to come up with the dividend. But the issue now, due to the volatility of the oil prices, so the Malaysia is actually the government established the GST. But due to political issue, now they abolished in May 2018, and the revenue for the oil prices is increased, especially coming for the dividends. But the concerns now, this is not good and it's very fragile. That's why Malaysia are now thinking, many researchers and also many analysts as well as many market push the government at least to less rely on the oil revenue and to expand our tax revenue base, particularly from the progressive tax, such as our one-off corporate, super profit corporate. Just recently they announced 33% of the one-off super profit company to address one of the issue of lower revenue. Second one, there's also introductions to reintroduce the GST back with the smaller amount to around 3 to 4%. Previously it's 6%, but this we believe is actually a regressive one. But this one is actually the aspect to go for only touch the standard rate for the luxury item and zero rating for the essential item. The third one is actually in terms of the reviewing back the incentive tax also relief by the government. If you, for your information, Malaysia have foregone around 3 billion of the revenue relief from the revenue tax relief from the government. There are so many tax relief that government give to Malaysian, to citizens, particularly for the high income group. So this is also pressure by the market for the government to reduce this relief incentive. And the fourth one is actually in terms of the strengthen our monitoring in terms of the tax collections and effectiveness of implement a good strategy to improve our government tax collection effectiveness. That's all. Because we couldn't deny the volatility of the oil price is very volatile. It will hurt Malaysia if they not expand or increase the tax base from this current. Because if you look at tax to GDP ratio is low, if 15%, lower than the average of 21.9% of the GDP among the middle income countries, middle upper income countries, which show that's the room, the space for the government to to expand. This is one of the reasons also we think that government has a room to further expand this our tax base. Okay, that's all. Did I answer your question?
Thank you. Thank you
Right.
for your answer.
All right. I hope I answered your question. Okay. Can we go next, Verena?
Sure, we can go there. So let's see if it works with sharing. Do you hear me well? Can you hear me in the meantime?
Yes,
Yeah,
it's clear.
Very
Yeah.
clear, very clear.
Great. So I suggest we can begin now with the presentation. My name is Verena Vamerau, and today, within the framework of the e-learning course on public finance for social protection analysts, I would like to give you a brief presentation, trying to stick to the 15 minutes if possible, on the social protection reform in Cambodia. The agenda is set first with a public finance context, very briefly. Then I would like to enter the assessment of current social protection system and propose a social protection potential reforms without sticking only to one, but as options, and then the way forward. In general, we're talking about Cambodia as a lower middle income country that is aspiring to actually attain an upper middle country by 2030. However, due to COVID, the economic growth that was being gained was stopped at this point and slowed a lot the economy. And the recovery is slow. However, especially the service construction and the real estate sectors were those that were mainly affected. In addition, what is very interesting to consider of Cambodia is that between
Verena,
2000...
excuse me for interruption.
Yes.
But we don't see your presentation.
You cannot see it?
Yes.
Ah, good that you tell me. So you're not being able to see. Okay, good. That's important. So then that you should have told me before. So are you seeing it now or not?
No,
Not yet.
we have your screen, but not your presentation.
Okay, so then this is very bad. Why it's not working?
Okay. Yeah, it's okay now.
I see.
But are you seeing the presentation as such?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm?
So did you probably haven't seen this, right? Are you seeing the agenda right now?
Yes.
Yes.
Agenda. Public
Yes.
finance
The
context.
agenda, yes. We
Yeah,
can see it
okay,
now.
great, perfect. Okay, so sorry for this. Apologies, it didn't work. And thanks that you told me,
Yeah.
Amran. So now it's working, right? Yeah?
Yeah, we can see it now.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So and I was also telling you before this interruption that Cambodia, actually before I went to this slide, Cambodia is actually having an increase of the poverty, had a big reduction of the poverty rate between 2000 and 2015. It's incredible, which could be also aligned to several factors, but also to this growth and improvement of the economy. And it actually reduced the poverty rate from 60% to 13.5% in 2014. And that is the poverty rate for which I also accounted all this brief assessment. So I hope that you can see now my second slide on revenue and tax, that even if there is very little available information on revenues and tax. That's what I could present from here based on IMF 2021. And I wanted to briefly show you how I compared with other countries, the different expenditures. We can actually observe the different comparisons with the other countries here and to see how the biggest share is on. Can you also see my mouse, right? Can you?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, we see your mouse.
Okay, thank you. So we can see that the highest share is on the taxes on goods and services, followed then by the income on profits and gains. Here, it's another way of showing the classification of revenues. On the right side, we can see how actually when we analyze each of them, taxes on goods and services between 2010 and 2019, this has increased from 35% to 50% as a share of the whole total tax revenue in Cambodia. And then on taxes on income, profits, and capital gain, this also incremented from 10 to 19% here, as we can see. And taxes on international trade and transaction, on the other side, reduced from, I took what was available from 2010 up to 2019, and that reduced in comparison to others. And this, for example, on grants also reduced a lot in comparison to the others. So if we see the historical tax mean as percentage of GDP from 21 to 2017 in Cambodia, here we can see the development, how it's particularly focused on other taxes on goods and services is the main share, and also the VAT was what increased a lot. However, all of them increased, as we can see, except for other taxes that were just present here at the beginning of the 21st century. So how can we see this with the expenditure increases? That was actually only focused in a few areas. When we unfortunately, I couldn't find any information in the IMF, but I could find from World Bank staff calculations, this expenditures by ministry, even though it's not disaggregated in the same way. Here, I found it most interesting to see that the highest share is actually on defense and security, where they concentrated in the few areas, economy and finance, and on the other side, well, that would be the highest share, I would say, even though we also can see on education, youth, and sport, and which I had also marked with a color. However, it's now not appearing in the presentation. As part of this context also of public finance in Cambodia, I wanted to present you this expense when we focus specifically on the social expense in Cambodia, which on one side we can see here, as in this part, that it's very small, the social benefits expense in comparison to the whole expenses that Cambodia has, and it's minimal in comparison to the almost here 16% expenses. So when we disaggregate these part, this is also showing from 2015 to 2019 how the expenses increased. However, here we don't see such a big increase in the different social benefit expenses when we disaggregate them. Now looking this, focusing on 2016, I took just 1 year of the social expenses based on the budgetary central government information that I could find. And here we can see that the employment-related social benefits are the highest share, and actually social assistance is less. So the employment-related social benefits are social transfers, or are actually it's the coverage for civil servants, and it's not the non-contributory aspects of social assistance. So this is higher than the social assistance for sure, but as we can see, it's very low in general, not reaching up to 1.5 here in general, and the social assistance, the non-contributory would be almost 0.5. It reduced actually to, or it reached up to 0.6, but not more than that. Basically, we have two different components. On one side, the social assistance, which is largely emphasized in these aspects here, as we can see, human development, emergency response, social health assistance, social welfare for elderly and disability, and also a TVET. On the other side, we have a social insurance. I please ask, as I cannot see the chat, please let me know when I'm on time. So I will try to rush a bit, given the inconvenience I had at the beginning still, but please let me know on audio. Thanks a lot. On the other side, we have the social insurance, pension, health insurance, and employment injuries. One important thing now I wanted to get when we make an assessment of the current social protection system, and which is based particularly on a Parliamentary Institute of Cambodia's aspects. So there is an increased attention through the social protection policy framework that is covering from 2016 to 2025, focusing on these two main pillars that I briefly introduced before. And what is, when we see, and as we also should present here the gaps, it's particularly focusing on the poor coordination between the humanitarian aid and social assistance system, identifying vulnerable, even though, which is very interesting, is that there is an ID poor, and I'm happy to tell you more about the ID poor system, which is extremely important for Cambodia, because that's how they identify their beneficiaries as well, and the vulnerable person that should get benefits. The most spending, so what I also think it's important here to say, and is that there are narrow scholarships and school feeding program, the low school attainment of youth drop out of school to receive vocational training, which we also have seen reflected with the TVET mentioned before. And yes?
Maybe it's just, okay, it's my internet that was unstable. Okay, it's fine.
Okay.
Please continue.
Okay. So social insurance program, we also have one of the main important gaps is that it's implemented under different ministries. So there are certain inconsistencies and poor cost effective of program implementation and resentment among the government civil servants, but also that the most spending for retired public employee is mainly financed by tax finance, so not contributory. That is an issue, of course. Other aspects which we will not be able to tackle, even though there are gaps, but through this reform that we will propose here, is that the expenditure of health sector as a share to GDP is very low comparing to other countries, and employment scheme is also missing. Self-employed persons are hardly reflected in the system as well. That means also their contributions are missing. What do we propose for social protection reforms as a value for money is particularly having a focus on health and education. That it would be the best way to meet the SDGs and also improve the productivity of the country. In addition, so when we disaggregate that would mean ensuring a health equity fund, which is the scheme that is running in Cambodia for the lower income wealth quintiles, particularly these group of persons that we mentioned here, so that we ensure the most vulnerable are covered. School feeding is a suggestion to have a universal school feeding with an adequate coverage, and also a school scholarship, which maybe at the beginning rather means tested, because it might be too expensive to make it universal as well. Non-contributory family package would be a way to actually give a whole coverage to the extreme poor population, which we said at the beginning was 13.5 set in 2014 by the government. And actually, at the moment, the way the effective coverage of the SDG 1.3.1 is only 16.4%, and that's why we want to to capture through the value for money, both direct and indirect costs, but benefits as well over the short, medium, but also on the long time frame. That would be a way how to think how we can ensure through a family package to cover the most extreme poor population. COVID-19 cash transfer, and the gray ones are two ones that both gray marked here programs are the ones that I couldn't cost in the proposal, which I will present you now. The social pension to ensure the old age security is also a program that I believe can have a multiplier effect, particularly due to the aging population. So the costed options, which I've mentioned briefly before, of the schemes, can be observed here as percentage of GDP. As I have put you in the previous slide, there is an option of means tested and universal old age security or social pension, but I would suggest to first introduce the means tested one and progressively increment either on one side the number of beneficiaries and also the level of the benefits. In the medium term, we can see in 2025 here we have these costs as already shown in the table, but now focusing on this part. But the potential fiscal space is actually due to the economic growth that the country will have, and where the weight of the proposed reform will be less on the GDP time. And the way of financing is particularly on taxes on goods and services, including the VAT, good and service tax excises, and customs and import duties, but also on the tax on company profits. So in this way, we're also using some of the political priorities, how to expand the social protection floor seen also during the course to actually reallocate also public expenditures on these priorities set here. So the core messages is to basically, based on the aging population, focus how to incrementally cover, increase the coverage of the programs, the social protection programs mentioned here, and in order to cover first the most or the extreme poor population. And this will definitely not be all at once. So that's why this should be evaluated, as we can see in the last slide. It should be reevaluated and reprioritized every 2 years in order to see if also this still is feasible and available, given the estimations of the economic growth suggested here, and seeing if the benefits are adequate, the type of benefits, the modality, considering also how the technologies and innovations are applied to implement all these social protection programs. These 3 points at the beginning of this slide, I would just like to close with them. The suggested reform has less fiscal costs across the time, and that's why it's also a way how to show that the increased positive effect of the public opinion due to the coverage population at risk and most vulnerable ones can be gained through this reform. And lastly, it would help also to improve standardized information of vulnerable population through ID4, which is the existing system which is working, and this should build upon. So we are not coming with a parallel new system, rather building upon that what exists already in country. With that, I would like to thank and open for any question you will have. Apologies for the technical that I haven't realized that the screen was not being shared at the beginning. So please, thank you for your attention so far. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much,
Okay.
Verena. I have a question. Can you, as I'm interested to know about your ID Pro system in Cambodia. Can you just briefly share about that?
Yeah, sure. Just to know, are there more questions besides the ID? Okay, so then I will go with that one. So basically, it has a poverty threshold, and it identifies the poor whose household, it classifies it between the income level using a proxy means test. But the important thing is it also involves the community-based targeting, and includes also the participation of assessing if the
Hello? Hello? Hello?
Salina joined again.
Okay, she's back. Okay, it's okay. I think she's back now.
I'm so sorry. I think
So-
my network is not so good.
Yeah.
The recording is on
With-
again, right? Oh,
Yes,
I'm so sorry
it's
for
back
that.
on.
Okay.
Okay,
No
so it continued now, the recording, right?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I don't know where you got up to what point,
The community.
or if it answered your question.
Yes, it's actually is until the community that the base, including the ID per also based on the income for the person and also community. Oh, I'm so
So did you manage to hear that they actually give a poverty score based on a different range of information, such as the quantity and quality of the household's assets, the number of children that are in the household, and did you manage to hear that?
no, I lost.
Demographics. Okay, okay. So no worries. I can go again on that. So it's actually the households are classified using a proxy means test and giving then assigned a poverty score on different households. So they are classified between ID poor 1, ID non-ID poor, if you get even a 0 to 44. And I was telling you that I'm not sure if these last numbers are still running nowadays, but based on the literature I could find, it's non-poor from 0 to 44, then ID poor 1 would be from 45 to 58, then ID poor 2 would be greater than 58 if a household receives that score. And the important thing, or what makes it different, is that there is also an engagement of community identifying the poor. So it's not only a poverty score without engagement of the community.
Okay, I see. Thank you so much, Verena. I'm so sorry, Costanza. Thank you so much, Verena.
Yes, I'm here.
I'm so sorry because I just it's a problem with my network and I lost the connections. So is it it was recorded earlier of in
That's fine. You'll probably have 2 recordings.
Okay, I see. I'm so sorry.
No, don't worry.
So
No, don't worry. Thank you so much for volunteering. That's much appreciated. Don't worry. So
I will feel bad.
How many? That's fine. How many presentations have you been able to make so far?
2. So another 2 to go.
Okay, good. I won't take any more time then. Sorry, I just wanted to check everything was fine. Okay.
Costanza, unfortunately, need to leave at 4 p.m. So we have still time to go for the 2 presentations, but I might just run out after 4 p.m.
No worries, no worries.
Yeah.
I'm sure you'll sort that out with your peers.
Yeah, we have sorted
Okay,
that out, but I'm not probably going back to the main
No,
presentation.
that's fine. Don't worry. That's not required at all, Verena. Don't worry.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye. So any further question? Happy to answer. On the other side, happy also to give the floor to another person.
Roman, do you have a question? If not, I think we can go ahead for the third presentation.
No, actually, I haven't questions. Thank you.
Thank you,
Verena.
Arman. So please go ahead with your presentation so we can finish on
First of
time.
all, can you hear me well?
Yes, clear.
And we can see your presentation as well.
Okay, thank you guys. So Today, my presentation today is about public finance for social protection in Kazakhstan, my native country. So let me start. First, I would like to briefly explain the situation with the revenue and expenditure. And as you can see from this slide, the amount of revenue in Kazakhstan is about 18–19% of GDP, while the expenditure is a little bit higher, around 19–20%. And the one, and during the last 5 years, the specific year was 2017, when expenditure was 23%, while revenues 21%. So in terms of structure of tax revenues, I would say that there are 3 main sources of revenues. The first is corporate income tax, which give around 28% of total tax revenues. The second is VAT, which is about the quarter of the total revenues. And then is taxes on exports. As I said earlier, Kazakhstan is a very rich oil country, and that's why export of oil is quite very important in terms of budget in Kazakhstan. And generally, tax revenues as percentage of GDP is around 16.7% of GDP. When it comes to the social protection expenditures, I would say that it's a very big share of expenditures in the national budget, which takes around 25% of national budget expenditures, which is also equal to 5% of GDP in 2019. Then I'm not going to describe some social programs that exist in Kazakhstan. I only want to say that we have a very comprehensive social protection system, which is like legacy from the Soviet Union period. And I would like focus more on some bottlenecks of this current system. On that slide, you can see data from the last ILO social protection report. And this slide illustrates data about effective coverage by social protection systems by functions. And you can see Kazakhstan, the red row, and we I think quite low in terms of when it compares to the some high income countries, which is our goal, or even Eastern Europe countries. For example, when we talking about children, social protection of children or mothers with newborns, you can see, for example, that coverage in Kazakhstan is about 40–50%, while in Europe, Eastern Europe, it's around 80 or 96%, for example. And I think this is the key issue of current social protection system in Kazakhstan. But there are also other issues which I would to illustrate. This data come from the Atlas of Social Protection Indicators of Resilience and Equity, ASPIRE, so-called, this database of World Bank. And for example, here you could also see the data about the coverage, but in terms of income of people. And you can see that the poorest quintile have on covered by the social protection system only on 56%, for example. Or when it, for example, when it comes to the benefit cost ratio, meaning that how much poverty gap reduction when it compares to the spending on the social programs. And it meaning that only from $1 spent to the social protection programs, only 28 cents goes to the reduction of poverty gap, for example. And that's why I proposed some kind of reform in Kazakhstan, which has the main goal is aligning the national social protection system with the ILO social protection floors and ILO Social Security Convention 102. And some estimation have been prepared, and total amount around 7.2% of GDP. I propose to cover child benefits that is currently existing in Kazakhstan, all children aged up to 17, while in current situation it is only children aged 0 to 1 year receiving child benefit. In terms of disability benefit, I propose to raise the amount of benefits up to 40% of average wage. Similarly, about old age pension and about household transfer, I propose to raise the equitable population up to 10% of total households and raise benefit level up to 100% of subsistence minimum, meaning the national poverty line. So as I said, the total cost of my so-called reform is 7.2% of GDP in 2021. When it comes to potential fiscal space, I would like to highlight 4 points. The first is the current system in Kazakhstan. The main feature is lots of tax preferences and incentives in Kazakhstan, which has little effect on business and economy development, and it costs around 6% of GDP. And the second point is a relatively low and flat rate of personal income tax. And the next is a poor quality of budget investment projects, especially in civil engineering and infrastructure. And if we improve our quality of budget investment, we could save around 1 trillion Kazakhstani tenge. It's around 2% of GDP. And also we annually has around 200 billion tenge or 0.3% of GDP as budget balances, meaning that this amount has not been utilized during the budget year. So in total, we had fiscal space estimated around 6.5% of GDP. Of course, I understand that all that amount of fiscal space, our politicians are not likely to spend to social protection programs. That's why I propose some gradual steps to reform implementation. And here on this slide, you can see 2 options. When we implement a reform proposed in 1 step, and which is red line, and then this green blue line, it's blue line, it's about a gradual reform. So you can see that if we will implement gradually, it's more affordable and I think more
Fatimata, can you mute yourself, please?
Sorry.
Thank you.
Guys, can you hear me? Can I continue? Just 1 minute, please.
Yes, can. Go ahead, Arman.
Yeah. So, and oh, it's my final slide. So core messages, I think, ensuring the first is ensuring social protection floors is essential for sustainability and development in Kazakhstan. And there is potential for fiscal space growth within the current budget, meaning that no need for new taxes, and social protection goals are achievable with a gradual approach, and which is particularly important in post-COVID era, when new challenges we accepted as consequences of COVID. I think that's all. If you have any questions, happy to answer, guys.
Clap, 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 clap. Very good, Arman.
Yeah,
Thank you.
well done.
So I have a question for how you calculated the cost of the fiscal space. I'm intrigued because I would love to learn more on that.
Yeah, me too.
Actually, it's not my estimations. It's just estimations of experts. You can see here. It's we are lucky to have a World Bank report in 2017 with estimations and some of new reform in taxation, and this number mentioned on this slide, almost the first, the second, and I think yes, and the third one, it's from the World Bank report, and the last one is from the speech of our chairman of Accounts Committee for Control of Execution of Republican budget.
And
so, meaning that the last point, it's our national auditors, budget auditors.
Mm-hmm. And then how your reform would cost approximately 7%, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yes,
something like
yes.
that.
If we will apply the one-step reform, it will cost 7.2% in 2021, and will finish by 5.8% in 2020 or 30.
Mm-hmm.
But if you will apply gradual approach, meaning that we're not going to raise benefits level, for example, for the old age pension, we're going to raise it gradually from 30%, starting from 30% in 2021, and then gradually raising in 2025, 35%, and then 40% into 2029, for example.
And how much is it currently? How much are the social protection expenditures right now in comparison to the reform? That was the
right now it's 5%.
Okay.
5% of GDP. Here you are.
Perfect. Okay, great. That was my question. I just wanted to understand the numbers. Thank you.
Do you have any other questions?
No, I don't have a question. Very good, Arman.
Thank you. So I'll stop my presentation.
Okay, if there is no more question, I think I will start sharing my presentation.
Okay.
Would you like that I make your timekeeping?
Who will keep my time now?
I will do it. I will let you know by 15 minutes.
Okay. Just let me share here. Okay, are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I see.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to present my country of interest, which is DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo. It's the first largest population of poor globally, so it's among the poorest country. And it is estimated that 73% of the Congolese population live with less than $1.9 a day. So The other thing is that the country is very rich. The mining, the cobalt and copper in particular, are very widely spread in the country. And also there is a lot of other potential, but not currently used, in fact. Okay, so the national budget is about 10.99 billion, 19% of the GDP. Then the tax mix is essential. The revenue is essentially based on taxes on goods, as I was just saying. More and more, this structure is changing as they have introduced also social security contribution, which represent now 7.08%. So when you see in other countries, you will see that the tax part in the social contribution in the tax mix is bigger and more stable. But here we see that it's increasing, but more and more they tend to use also taxes on goods and services. But the social contribution is also increasing. If I had to assess the social protection system, I would say that the country is facing a lot of challenges, and it's just starting to be stable and to have a kind of peace. So the social protection function represents just 2.5% of the country overall expenses. It's less than health, education, and culture and sports. So most of the budget is going into security and the other expenses for the states. Let's say it like this. Okay, but however, the situation is changing as the government tend to put more and more in the social security. In 2020, the government took the decision to allocate like 29% of the budget to social security and to establish universal health coverage in the country. So there is a lot of gap, as we also only have contributory schemes here. Most of the time, if there is gaps, the government will only come to cover the gaps for contributory schemes. There is no non-contributory schemes. Sorry. So the thing here is to extend the fiscal space and introduce new non-contributory schemes in order to expand the coverage in the country. For that, what we propose here, okay. Oh, sorry. Okay, what we propose is to increase mining revenue and VAT. Okay, yes. And those are already things that are going on for the 2021. So the government is trying now to increase the tax revenue by increasing the VAT, and also to increase the mining revenue and to increase the debt of the country, to borrow more money from the IMF. Where am I? Okay. In terms of value for money, the country need more efficiency. As at the time we spoke, there is at the time we speak, there is a lot of need, a lot of gaps in the country, and most of them are not covered by the social security system, as it's only consider people in the formal system. So the informal system, which is 80% of the country, is not considered. There is also effectiveness and equity consideration, coverage and targeting, adequacy, comprehensiveness, because there is no communication between the government and how can I say, all the partners, and each are implementing its own like small program to help population, but there is no communication or coordination between those, let's say, those bodies. So for social protection reforms, but I have a slide missing. Okay, there is no problem. The proposal for me is to introduce a family allowance, for universal family allowance for child between 0 and 15 years old, as there is 43% of the child in the country who live with malnutrition. So this is the first thing I'm proposing. It's costly. I don't have, it's cost 478 billion, and it's only 0.44% of the GDP. So this will cover all the household, and it will be universal for all age equally, a universal coverage for people from 65 years. Disability also, universal coverage, and the total cost for all this will be 528 billion, which represent only 4.82% of government expenditure. The target is to take this percentage of government expenditure from 2.47% to 5% progressively, let's say. So the social protection reform to increase the fiscal space in the country are as following: reallocate public expenditure to, for example, instead of having most of the budget, the expenditure on security and costs, the state cost, I think we can advocate to reallocate some of the expenditure to social security, increase tax revenues. That is also already ongoing. I think the government has already taken the decision to increase the VAT percentage, expanding social security coverage and contributory revenues also. For that, since the informal sector is the most important here, I think I think the state should have, the government should have some measure to increase, to bring this person in the informal sector in a more formal system, because currently the formal sector is mainly the civil servant. All other private practitioner and all other things, they are informal, and they are not considered in the contributory scheme. Lobbying for aid and transfers. The country relies a lot on international aid and transfers. So I think there is still a space to have more support from the international organization. Eliminating illicit financial flows. The country is currently just having, is one of the latest country on the transparency, the transparency ranking. Just, I think, 33 points. So it's something the government will have to work on. Using fiscal and foreign exchange reserve, because we have a lot of here in DRC, we use mostly USD instead of the country, the local currency, which is Congolese franc. Managing debt, borrowing or restructuring existing debt, and adopting a more accommodative macroeconomic framework. So the macroeconomic framework is currently complex, I think, and so it's really sensitive to any shock from the outside. So this is also, so these are the 8 points. I think the protection reforms should go on. For the medium-term costed plan, as you can see, as I was saying, I have proposed child benefits up to 5, universal, disability, old age, orphan also, and maternity allowance. The other thing is that the country is trying since the beginning of the year to introduce the universal health coverage. I did not see any costing tool for that, but I think it's something important that I have to mention here. They are really working on it, and they are looking for financing, they are mobilizing funds, and they are also building capacity of the civil servant working in that area, and UNICEF is supporting that. So the way forward, the way forward is linked to the reform that we're trying to implement, and we would like to encourage the transition to the formal sector, clean up the state budget with the aim to reduce non-compliant or misappropriated use of the public resources, conducting an audit based in particular on inventory and assessment of the expenditure and resource allocation, reallocate public spending by defining new trade-off between priorities so as to favor matters relating to social protection, restructure the domestic debt, fight against fraud and taxation and tax evasion, regulate and limit the circulation of foreign currency in the country. Okay, at last, leveraging support for. Okay, I didn't properly get this question, I think. But the most important here is to improve the information and the communication between the government and the parliament, which represents the citizens. I think that will be the most powerful tool to leverage support for the reform within the cycle, in the budget formulation cycle, between the budget formulation cycle and the budget approval, as it's something new to have the citizen budgets published in this country. So it's an opportunity to leverage support for the reform and to communicate and to let the population understand what it means for them and what are the implications for them. Okay, I think that's all for me. I don't have many informations on the.
No, you passed already the 15 minutes as you had your last slide. I didn't tell you anything because you were already on your last slide. So.
Okay. So I was just doing a disclaimer because there is a lot of like information on the country, and everything, the figures that I have presented are from the budget, the national budget of the country. So well, if you have questions.
Not from my side. Thank you for sharing.
Okay.
Arman, Nurfazlina?
So no, not also for my side. Thank you so much, Fadima.
Fadima is fine. Thank you, Nurfazlina. Okay. So I think we meet your deadline, Verena, finally.
Exactly, yes. Exactly.
I'm sure you are happy about that.
Yes, because actually my meeting began already 3:30 p.m. and I needed to apologize. So there are people waiting. I need to run to another meeting. Okay. So it was a pleasure to share with you guys. And I'm looking forward, if you can, Nurfazlina, to share with us as well, so that we have it. The transfer, that would be great.
Sure. I don't know. I think they will give the link. So I believe the link will be accessed to all. But let me see. If it's only for the specific to the ILO, I will put all in the loop.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Goodbye. I have a question, guys. Verena, you can go. I will just talk with Nurfazlina.
Oh, okay.
Tell me.
Bye.
For the grading, we have to go in
for the grading, we have to go to our the final week 7.
Okay.
And then there's a peer
review thing.
Yes, peer review thing. So
we have to select names of our peers. Yes.
Yes.
And then choose the.
Okay. Okay.
So we need
I have graded you already, the 3 of you.
Oh, thank you so much.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, bye. Bye, Verena.
Okay, bye, everyone.
Okay, it's fine. I'll find it.
Okay, all right.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, bye.
So you two are working in social protection, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I just started joining social protections, but if more focus on the for the learning.
Okay.
But I think Arman doing it as an analyst or policy.
Yes, I used to work in the Ministry of Social Protection here in Kazakhstan for